everybody, and welcome back to my channel. This week I woke up on Saturday and I decided I wanted to make an Halloween miniature, which seemed really out of left field considering up until that point I had not even thought about making a Halloween miniature. But I woke up, it pops in my head, and I just felt like I had to make it. I had to do it. I had to spend all weekend doing it, and so that's what I did. I spent all day Saturday, I spent all day Sunday working on this just so I could get it done in time for Halloween because I just felt like it really fit the mood, the atmosphere, all the vibes that I was going for. And as you probably see from the thumbnail, I made the Harga Temple from Midsommar. Midsommar? You can comment below and let me know how to properly say it. I really love that movie. I'm not gonna lie, the first time I watched it, I didn't understand it. The second time I watched it, I loved it. I really wanted to make the iconic temple, which if you don't know what that is, it's the giant yellow pyramid looking thing. Triangle thing. It was really popular, I feel like, all over when the movie came out. It was like on stickers and people were doing fan art of it. And I just wanted to build it. I just felt like I needed to build it. I just needed to do it. So I did it. And that is what we're gonna watch now. So I don't wanna keep you for too long. So we're gonna go ahead and get started on the video so you can see what I did. On Saturday morning, I woke up and I had this urge to make a Halloween miniature. And it really caught me off guard because up until this point, all of October, I had not once thought about making a Halloween miniature diorama thing. But when I woke up, I said, you know what? I'm gonna really stress myself out this weekend and I'm gonna spend all weekend working on this. I knew I would need to start off by making a platform for it to rest on because I did not have anything big enough to put it on. So I went ahead and started. I had these little plank things. I'm not entirely sure what they are. Also, if you hear the little click clack behind me, that's my dog walking around. He loves to walk around while I try to record. But after I made the platform, I spent a really long time trying to do these outlines and measurements for this miniature, even though I wasn't necessarily going with the specific scale. I wanted it to look right and relative to itself. And I spent a lot of time coming up with these measurements to make it look okay. And after I was done with the measurements, it was time to cut out the pieces. And as always, be very careful when doing this. I have slipped before and cut myself, and it hurts really badly, so just be really careful. But I went ahead and cut out the triangles, which I don't know why I went into this project thinking it was going to be easy. I ended up spending over 10 hours on this. It took all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and as you can see, there are many replacements of blades. I cut popsicle sticks with this blade and mat board, and just make sure if you're going to make something like this, you replace that blade very, very regularly because it starts to dull very quickly. So I went ahead and I cut out these triangles. As you can see here, this is the front of it. And I was a little nervous. I had to make that window probably about 6 or 7 times because it kept looking like it wasn't the right scale and relative to the door. However, I did end up liking how it turned out in the end. So, the 6 or 7 times ended up working out for me. After I cut out the front, I had to cut out the back, which was the same shape. I just retraced it and cut it out. So that way I wouldn't have to measure out everything again. It was the exact same size. But then came the sides. And let me tell you, if you're trying to make a triangle that's 6 inches by 6 inches by 6 inches, the sides will not be 6 inches tall or something. I don't even remember now. But the math is so much harder than you'd think. I was like, okay, this is going to be 6 inches by 6 inches, which will make it 6 inches tall. But that's not correct. So the squares took me a really long time to figure out to make the right size. And honestly, I was just happy when it was over. After I cut out the first one, I went ahead and measured the second one, and I cut that one out as well. Always remembering to replace the blade. After cutting out the 2 squares, I went ahead and cut out the small door as well as the window. And as you can see there, I slipped. So again, just be very careful. But I cut out the door and window, which the window ended up being really difficult because it's a square, so it doesn't have, not that it's a square, but it doesn't have any outside facing pieces like the triangle does, where the triangle, I only had to cut 2 sides, where with the rectangle square, I had to cut 4. And luckily I could turn it around, so any mess ups were interior, so you didn't see them, but it was a little bit of a challenge. If you don't know what Midsommar is, or Midsommar, if you know the correct way to pronounce it, please comment below and let me know. It is a film that is about a girl after a loss who goes on a trip to another country with her boyfriend and his friends. And there they meet a cult. Or is it a cult? Is it a cult? It's a cult. And it's all an allegory for moving on, breaking up, terrible things. It's a great movie. If you like cult movies, definitely check it out. Gluing this thing together was really difficult because it kept falling apart. It felt very much like trying to build a house out of cards. I tried gluing it and the triangle just kept falling over, and eventually I decided I was going to use tape, which you can see in the bottom left of the screen. The tape, however, is painter's tape, so it was very sticky and it did rip off some of the top layer of the mat board. However, that ended up not mattering because it ended up being on the inside where I ended up painting black later, you'll see. So it doesn't actually matter that it's ripped. Luckily, it did not rip on the outside, and even if it had, I guess it would have been covered in the stirring sticks that I used later. So it wouldn't have been that big of a deal, but I'm just kind of glad that it didn't rip worse because this painter's tape was very sticky. And if you look at the top of the screen, you can see my dog a little bit. He was very curious to see what I was doing. The reason why I like this movie is because I really like delving into people's minds and what causes them to go to extremes, like joining a cult or ignoring red flags that may be right in front of your face. I like knowing what's going through people's minds. It's a similar reason why I like true crime is because I like to know how minds work of people that aren't me. And so this movie really delves into that, the brainwashing that goes into joining a cult. And I think I don't know if it's accurate, but it's really interesting to watch. After getting two sides to stick together, I tried this approach where I kind of painted the glue on with an old business card, and that kind of helped. Sorry, I'm off screen here. I'm trying to get a better setup for recording that will hopefully come soon. But I tried to paint on the glue rather than having giant globs because I was afraid that giant globs would take longer to dry, and I needed them to stick together relatively quickly so it didn't collapse again. I will say, despite the fact that this tape was sticky and it did rip some stuff, it did hold it together pretty well. Once I got after I got the first two together pretty well, the rest kind of came together. It was just those first two that were very tricky. But again, it ended up working in the end with the tape, so I guess I'm glad for the tape. After I got it all together, or at least three sides of it, I decided that it was a little too shaky for me still. I was afraid that it might fall apart, and I wanted something kind of like a bracket. So this is something that I learned from Aira at Bentley House Miniatures. She does what she calls dollhouse band-aids, and I believe she uses printer paper, but I wanted something a little bit thicker to hold it together, so I used the back of a business card, and I just cut it in half, and I kind of made it a bracket right in the middle. So it holds the two roof pieces together, and I did put another like little broken popsicle piece in the top corner that touched all three sides, but it didn't work as well. So the bracket really helped in the long run, and because it was painted black, you couldn't see it at all. Here I'm just dry fitting the front on before I started gluing it, which I put a lot of glue and kind of dabbed it with my finger. I probably should have used a business card or a paintbrush or something, but I decided to use my finger because I have no self-control, I guess. But putting this in actually went in really well because I already had the other two sides it was touching already in and in place. This just kind of slid into place, and luckily it didn't fall too much. It fell a couple times that I don't think I recorded, but I managed to glue it in. And after I glue it in, I managed to tape it in. And after I got that, I try not to touch it again because the issue I ran into is when I touched it is when it fell apart. This is where it started to come together though and actually start to look like the temple to me. I finally was like, here's what I'm making. Here is the miniature, and it's going to come together. And this is where I taped it, and again, luckily it did not rip the front of it because I used a lot of tape on this to hold it together. I sped up a little bit here so you could kind of see what I was doing to add the popsicle sticks, but overall it ended up being really tedious, a lot of cutting wood and relaying wood, so I went ahead and skipped ahead and just showed you the end piece here. And then after I got done with this piece, I went ahead and did the front, which I show you here. I was going to move on to it. This piece was a little hard cutting out those little sections, or at least the triangle. I ended up cutting into the mat board beneath, but luckily I ended up managing to hide that. After that, I decided to do both sides, which I also didn't show because it was just laying down stirring sticks. And as you can see in the background, it was a very messy job. But I ended up getting all the wood sticks done, and I was really happy with it. And then after the wood sticks, it was time to move on to the framing of it. I'm not good with angles. I'm not good with angles at all, and it took me a very long time to get these popsicle sticks to be angled correctly. because I'm just not good with angles. I don't know what it is. I even have an easy cutter that comes with angles. I still could not get it correct. However, once I did get it correct, they went on I sanded it down to make sure that they laid flat with the front of the front of the temple. Because before that, they were a little wobbly, and I realized I needed to sand down the side sticks that I'd added. And once I did that, they laid flat and perfect, and I really liked how it turned out. I tried putting some 1, 2, 3 blocks on them to weigh them down, which you'll see, and they fell off. So I do not suggest that. I tried to use this card to get rid of any excess glue, because I did not want tons of glue globs, because I knew that if they dried and there was a lot, you would see them when I painted over them. So I tried to scrape them off, and this is where I tried using those 1, 2, 3 blocks. It ended up just gluing on fine. I didn't need them, and it just made it really wobbly, so pretty sure I took them off immediately after this clip. Definitely not needed if anyone else is going to make this. Now, a lot of people don't know this because it is very faint in the movie, but there is a symbol on the front of the temple, and I did debate not adding it in because it does look like a cross mixed with a not so great symbol. But I went ahead and added it just because it is a part of the temple and part of the movie, and it is an actual rune. So it's not what it looks like. If you think it looks like something bad, it's not that. After that, I went ahead and started painting, which I got this really bright yellow, and at first I was afraid it was too bright. Even though the temple is very, very bright in the movie, I was afraid it was too much, but I just went ahead and jumped right in and started painting with it, because I figured I could always dull it down if I needed to, which I do end up doing. I did end up dry brushing it, and I have a very love-hate relationship with dry brushing, but we'll talk about that in a bit. After I was done with the back, because I was afraid of how it was going to turn out, so I wanted to do the back first where you wouldn't see it, I went ahead and sped through me painting the sides, and then I painted the front, which I was really nervous about with the windowsill and the framing around the door and the little symbol at the top, that I was afraid that details might get murky if I globbed on paint too thick. So as you can see here, I did use very thin layers. Because of that, I had to do a lot of layers, and it ended up looking good, but this part took forever because I did use very, very thin layers. However, I did notice when I went to go dry brush it that I actually missed some spots. And as you can see here, I did end up globbing too much paint around the symbol, and it ends up looking really murky for a little bit there, but I ended up fixing it, luckily. I ended up doing, I think, 3 layers total of yellow paint, and I liked the saturation I ended up with, even though I did have to go back in right before dry brushing to hit up some crevices and between some planks that I did not get. It ended up looking good overall. And as you can see here, I did put the mat board back in the triangle because it's going to help hold the door on later. And I knew you wouldn't see it, even though, because it looks so different than the wood. But I knew you wouldn't see it behind the doors, so I went ahead and added those in as well to help hold the door on. Here's just me making the doors, which I realized that my hand is in the way for a lot of this, and I apologize. It's just me making the little doors out of little matchstick size wood, as well as mat board that I carved out from the front of the temple. These are directly from the movie. They are a bright blue color, which I will paint in a second. I actually think it's more of like a dark gray blue, but I ended up going with the sky blue because I thought it would contrast really well, and it's technically the correct color. And then on the inside, I went ahead and painted this with this dark black because I knew I wanted to put a flickering candle on the inside, like a battery-operated one. And I knew that if it was really dark inside, it would look more reflective and spooky and just all around better. So I went ahead and painted the inside. After that was the dry brushing, and I have a very complicated relationship with dry brushing because I like the way it looks when other people do it, but when I do it, I think it looks like crap. Luckily in this one, in the end, I don't think it looks horrible. I'm looking at it off to the side and on the camera at the same time. And man, was this a struggle. It was a journey. I added too much at one point. I had to paint back over it with yellow. I just hate dry brushing so much. It looks so good when other people do it, but when I do it, it doesn't look great. But I saw the movie and I looked at up close pictures of the building, and it is supposed to be kind of grimy. While it is a bright yellow, when you get close, there is a lot of wood grime showing in between the planks because it's supposed to be, this building that, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, they do end up burning down and it's out in the middle of nature, so it looks a little grimy, a little run down, even though it is painted this bright yellow. So I wanted to reflect that as best as possible, but I just don't know if me and dry brushing will ever get along. I really hope that someday I can learn the tricks of the trade. And then after that, I went ahead and added the 2 front doors, so that way the building part was done. After the building was done, I knew I needed to work on the platform it's going to sit on, which I was very nervous about, because I don't really know much about grass. I don't have any static grass, which I'd love to get into and try someday, but I don't have any, and I've never really made a building like this. I usually make interiors, so I went ahead and put down a layer of glue, and I had some of this green turf tough stuff, and I kind of just sprinkled it all over. However, it kept getting clogged in the container. I don't know if that's normal, but I ended up just putting on layers of it, glue, spraying it with watered down glue, and then it ended up looking all right. Here's the final shot of it, and I really ended up liking how it turned out. And I put those flickering candlelights in there, and it turned out even better. And I'm just so happy with it, and I'm so happy it's over after a whole weekend, 10 hours working on it. And there we go. That was the project. It took me a very long time to make it. I spent over 10 hours, divided over 2 days, to finish it on time for Halloween. I will say that I'm very happy with it. I did not glue it to the base specifically because the lights that went inside of it are little tea lights. They're like flickering little tea lights. And I was afraid that if I glued this down, I wouldn't have a way of getting them in and out. And afterwards, I thought it probably would have been a good idea if I had made like a back door on it, so that way you don't see it from the front, but I could open it on the back, put it in, you could flicker, but I didn't. Still, this comes off, and I can put it whatever I want in there. I don't know if I'll glue it down eventually in the future, because it isn't super stable, to be honest, but I'm really happy with it. I really like how it turned out, and it's just a cute little Halloween miniature. I don't know. I really like it. And that's it for this week. I have another video coming out next week that's going to be about a whole different project that I mentioned in my very first video that is going to be a room within a structure. And I can't give away too much, but you'll see in my next week's video. So if you're not already subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button below, and I will see you all in my next video. Goodbye!